This is Jody Lemieux, your host to the Spiritual Line CEO podcast, and you're listening to Conversations with Jody, your one divine guidance system, giving your mindset and business a spiritual facelift by tapping into energy, gaining inspiration, and up-leveling your life by unleashing your infinite potential. And on today's episode, I have with me Evan Mestman, Chief Gratitude Officer and founder at ProAttitudes. Thank you, Evan, for joining me.
Hey, I'm really grateful for you inviting me here. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. I'm so excited for our listeners to hear your message today about how you went from ashes to rising phoenix.
It was a transformation that I had to go through, but more than once, many times, lots of different pivots in my life.
And that's really important for people to understand that when we rise, it's a continual rise. And I would love for you to share a little bit of your nuggets, a little bit of your wisdom as to what it is that you can share with people that they can apply in their own life for them to rise from their ashes.
Well, what I do for a living right now as a health, wellness, and mindset coach, I was my first client. When as a kid, my nickname was Heavy Heavy, and that was not a fun place to be, being bullied and coming from a difficult childhood. I was very sickly as a kid. So, and I'm blind in one eye, which made it even more challenging. And all of those little things added up. But what ended up happening was I had to look in the mirror and swallow that bitter pill that said, no one's going to do this but me. And I didn't want to do it like my mom would go on a diet every Monday. That's not going to work. My father had crazy exercise programs, and he had all these crazy schemes of nutrition and supplements that he took and all these special diets that he would go on. And I'm like, no, that's not for me either. I decided to just change my habits one at a time. And that led to some ordinary changes that led to a transformation over a summer. And I've kind of been reverse engineering that ever since so that I can help my clients do the same thing.
I love what you said there, reverse engineering. If you could share with us, what does that reverse engineering look like?
Well, it's over a period of time. I would say it's striving to find the understanding and create a system and process for helping others go through what I went through and reproducing it. And just what I did is I decided to go to school for this. I got my master's in clinical nutrition. I'm a registered dietitian. But I also wanted to understand it not just on that one level. I wanted to understand, what does it take to change, and what about what's happening on the fitness and wellness side? Like, what does it take to thrive? And then I did my master's thesis in cardiac rehab to understand, well, what happens with chronic illness? How do you manage that? And then lastly, I wanted to really truly understand critical illness. Like, how does the body survive from something that's a critical insult, whether it's an illness or a trauma or a surgery, something. And so I spent a lot of time studying all three. And that gave me an understanding of that we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. That's why 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese, just staggering numbers, right? And over 50% of Americans are either have diabetes or have prediabetes, and half of them don't even know that they have diabetes, that have the condition that causes probably most of the situations, most of the reasons why people are admitted to hospitals, most of healthcare. A huge chunk of that change, billions of dollars, is being spent on chronic diseases that are caused by habits. Well, if I can understand that and help people change, maybe I could get to the root cause.
And I love what you're talking about here, the root cause, because the root cause will lead to transformation. And so I know you personally through networking, And something that you've talked about and that really resonated with me, and that's why I wanted you to share this message with the audience, your 3B attitude. If you wouldn't mind sharing the 3B attitude with the listeners.
So it's a funny story. I was listening to a song. I was trying to when I first was building my business, and I wanted to find out what is that exactly would kind of crystallize what I do. And I heard this song. I heard the lyrics wrong, but it now is my tagline. Become, be strong, be grateful. And it's from my faith. It's a spiritual song, but it is just. I love that that became my tagline because it's about this transformation. Becoming is finding your why, connecting to what's truly important to you, right? So I always say it's like the caterpillar asking the butterfly, how do I become a butterfly? And the butterfly tells the caterpillar, well, you have to want to fly so badly, you're willing to give up being a caterpillar. So that's that whole process of becoming. But then there's a component once you realize where you want to go, you have your why. Well, what about the what and the how? It requires discipline. It requires grit, perseverance. That's the be strong component. And so I teach people that you can work with your brain and with your body to make it easier. There are habits of a happy and productive brain that we can align with versus constantly fighting with motivation and willpower. Like, what about willpower? What if you bypassed motivation? I thought about those things, thinking about how do I present this to people differently so they don't keep having that same resistance. And it's a reframe. And then lastly, gratitude changes everything. Gratitude is really, to me, it gets you centered and locked into the precious present. It allows you to be. It quiets the mind, and it leads to surrender of just what's out there and going, doesn't mean that you give up. It means I'm I'm enough, and I'm grateful for that. And everything I have is enough. Thank you. I'm so grateful. And amazing things happen when you let go of expectations and focus on anticipation without that need for it has to be this way. And I do it. There's three different ways that I do it. I help people live their lives with their minds, not their mouths. I do it by being intentional, and it's specifically being intentional with their health. And I also do it by quieting that inner critic, that voice that we talk to every day more than anybody else. We talk to ourselves, and I label it that inner critic. Mine, he's sitting up here on my shelf. It's Darth Vader here, right? That's my inner critic. But I shrunk him down to 6 inches, as you can see. He's much smaller than he used to be. He used to be 6 feet tall. And what I do is I help people to silence that and then also to develop their inner coach. So if you think about, I mean, Yoda, it's speaking to people from things that they're familiar with. If you don't know Star Wars, I'm sorry, it's okay. But most people don't remember Star Wars, and I think that those stories are there and so powerful because they show these transformations, and that's what I help people do: is go through that transformation through the B3 way. That's a long answer to a short question.
No, I really appreciate your story there because it really resonates on a deeper level. Rather than the intellectual level, you're really speaking to people on a level that's relatable to their soul, to what's really going on the inside, rather than, as you said, an outside solution. You're really showing and guiding people to their own inner wisdom. And yeah, that's a really powerful message. And so, what is next?
I'm just getting started. What's next? To me, it's about, I've been working really hard on getting this to work, to scale so I can help more people. When I first started, we talk about pivots in my life. When I first started, I was working in private practice. I was actually in the hospital, and across the street was a gym. And because I had gone to school as a personal trainer, I was putting myself through my master's program in clinical nutrition. And, I'm a hard worker. I was working 55 hours a week while I was doing my schooling, and it was just amazing that whole time in my life. I got every other Sunday off. I was, just working like a workaholic. But I remember seeing after I decided to work in the hospital, I gave up obviously that position, and I went, I need to take care of myself. Oh, I want a gym, but gym memberships were pretty expensive. So I went across the street. There was a gym across the street from the hospital, and I went in and I went on a tour of the health club with the manager who happened to be there. And I saw an office that was filled with boxes and filing cabinets. And I said, you know, you're not using this office really for anything. What if we cleaned it out, gave it to me, and I give every one of your new members a free nutrition consult? And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurship into private practice. And it was the best lead magnet I ever created. But more importantly, it gave me the confidence to say, you know what, this is part of my journey. I want to work in wellness, not just the hospital was to get experience. And I knew that I learned an awful lot there, seeing patients day in, day out, but I wanted to see patients in a well state. But that pivot led me to being getting recruited by a startup that was it was a wellness company delivered via the internet, and my life took a turn because I started working for this startup, and we went public on, which was a great thing. I mean, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be able to take my program to the masses, and we went public on 9/11/2001 at Cantor Fitzgerald. And so we went bankrupt, unfortunately. So I had to kind of put my tail between my legs and say, what am I going to do now? This was a really soul sucking moment in my life. And I pivoted to corporate America. But with that pivot, I lost I lost a piece of myself going into corporate America. I loved it. I was still working, but corporate America just has the ability to suck, not intentionally, they suck all the joy out of everything that you do. And unless you've worked in corporate America, and when the more people that do, the harder and harder they laugh when I say that. And it's the reason why it's not intentional is because it's human nature to be in your primal state, that animal state, fight or flight state. It takes intentionality to bring it to that level of where you're developing your spiritual self. And because there's so much ego involved and there's so much competition, and the leadership is a lot of times lacking, and the focus is on things that are material instead of truly transformational, spiritual, it misguides people, which, that to me is a big problem. But after 20 years in corporate America and having the opportunity to come back to doing what I love to do, and coming back to my power state instead of constantly being my primal state, I'm healthier than I've ever been. I'm happier, but more joyful. Happiness is more transactional. Joy, to me, is more internal. That, to me, is probably the most important thing, is that transformation happened because I aligned with what I feel my true purpose is. Not that those 20 years were necessary to create what I need to do now. And
I
it
love
made me who I am now.
Yeah, I love the message that you're sharing with everyone, because it's a message of, you know, the hospitals. You saw a lot of sick people. You wanted to see people well. You wanted to see them healthy. You got into corporate America and it was taking out the happiness of business. And like you said, it's not intentional, but that's the result that they're getting. So once
Mm-hmm.
again, you're now creating an environment where a business environment where it's your reverse engineering, if I can use your word there again, reverse engineering business to have a more joyful state, a more joyful living, a state of being, part of your 3 Bs. Like this message is really powerful for the listeners to hear, because maybe they're in a place in their corporate, or maybe they're in a place of, feeling sick or not feeling well, and they desire to be in a place of empowerment or a place of health, a place of joy. So this message right here, Evan, is a really powerful message for people individually, as well as people in the business realm.
Well, thank you. It's one of the things that I find people do is they blindly imitate what they've done the day before and the day before that because it's easier. I like to use the example of making copies. I remember when we made copies in the past when I had handouts, I just keep using, I forget to find the master and I just make a copy of a copy and then a copy of a copy of a copy. And before you knew it, you'd start getting remnants on the page and words would disappear and it would never look like what it was intended to look like. And then you had to start all over again. And it's kind of like what we do in our lives is that we blindly imitate what we did yesterday. And again, we do it. But instead, we need to find a deeper meaning instead of just repeating and imitating what we did the day before. And that I think is the foundation to really the B3 way, but also for developing your capacity and those attributes. It's like when we were in our mother's wombs, we're developing attributes that are not of any use at all in the womb. For instance, eyes, can't see in the womb. Fingers with touch, right? Our lungs, our mouths and our teeth and our tongues and taste and our ears. We can barely hear. I mean, so when you think about how that's developed in the womb, when we're here now, we come out and we're literally this far away from this world, but we don't know it. Well, I feel that that is really how we are now in this world. There are capacities, attributes that we need to develop spiritually, every person, which will help us to get out of our own heads, out of our minds, not to be out of our minds, but you know what I mean, out of the those negative thoughts that are constantly ruminating up there, that 60 to 80,000 thoughts that we hear every day. Believe it or not, they've counted, I don't know how they did it, but you're counting how many thoughts process through your head. And a lot of them are repetition. And many of them, 75% or more, can be negative. And the idea is, well, why does that happen? How do we stop it? It's because it's unconscious. It is the way we were designed as animals. But in order for us to develop spiritually or develop those attributes, we need to be intentional. We need to, instead of just reacting, we need to be. We need to be focused in the precious present. And that is where actually amazing things can happen. When you see that you can let go of the past and not ruminate and be angry about the past or the fear of the future, and you let go of that fear and just focus on the precious present, that to me is, some people call it enlightenment, but to me it's called development. It's really how we get mastery of ourselves and what's truly important to us, right? How to live the life you've always dreamed of.